speaker, Dr. KD Singh. Dr. KD Singh is legal professional with vast experience across various sectors of the economy in antitrust matters. Presently, he is posted in Antitrust Division of Competition Commission of India. Earlier, he was associated with Legal Division of CCI. Before joining CCI, Dr. Singh was working as an assistant professor of law at University of Delhi. So he was also practiced law before various courts, tribunals, regulatory bodies, and has vast global exposure. So I would like to welcome you, sir, on behalf of ICFI University Jaipur. And now I request Professor Rajesh Kothari, the president of the ICFI University Jaipur, to welcome our guest and address our participants. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Josna.
Thank you, sir.
I welcome my colleague, my friend, Mr. KD Singh ji. Sir, I think we're talking second time to each other, sir.
Absolutely right, sir.
Right. So what we could do last time, we'll make it up, and whatever we left last time, we'll do this time only.
Absolutely.
Surprisingly, sir, you have been working with antitrust. Can't do this thing. Clear?
Yes.
And because of pandemic, we are all in search of trust. So what this paradox? सिंह साहब आज आदमी को भी आदमी पे भरोसा नहीं रहा सर.
It is antitrust, not breach of trust. So I kept my word and I am with your organization.
I understand, sir. It is on the latter side, sir. And I personally believe and feel that the pandemic has taught few good lessons. A, always have a trust in nature. Let's not play against the nature. B, always have trust in the system in which we operate. And C, trust your family, trust your colleagues, and trust your system. Sir, ICFI University Jaipur is bouncing back slowly and gradually. And we are so thankful to you that you are going to spare your valuable time sharing knowledge. Because when I hear about you, once I hear about you, it appears to be who's and who's in legal fraternity one. It started as a assistant professor, and occupying this prestigious position. It speaks volume of your knowledge, intelligence, and more importantly, how to handle current situation one. We understand that because of pandemic, many people have lost their jobs. Millions have lost their jobs. All right, sir. So there is a feeling. The feeling is, can you be an entrepreneur? Can we be an entrepreneur? And variety of issues are there. I personally, on my behalf and behalf of ICFI University Jaipur and by behalf of my colleague, Mr. Arun Saini ji, Dr. Arun Singh, and others, welcome you to this thought-provoking, mind-boggling webinar. We are desperate to listen to you, sir. Welcome, ICFI University Jaipur. और मैं ये उम्मीद करता हूं कि ये धुन छटेगी, उम्मीदें फिर आएंगी, हम फिर मिलेंगे और तब ये टेक्नोलॉजी नहीं होगी, हम रूबरू आपसे बात करेंगे, आप कैंपस में आएंगे, बच्चों के साथ जो तजुर्बा है जीवन का वो हम शेयर करेंगे. इवेंचुअली इंडिया इज सेट टू बी अ कंट्री ऑफ मिलेनियल यूथ, राइट? दैट मींस मेजर पार्ट ऑफ पॉपुलेशन आर इन दी ऑन द लर्निंग कर्व. और आप जैसे पुरोधा अगर बच्चों के सामने होंगे तो बच्चों के ज्ञान में जो क्षमता वृद्धि होगी इस I think mind-boggling and beyond imagination. आपका स्वागत है और इस उम्मीद के साथ कि जब भी हालात सामान्य होंगे, ये जो न्यू नॉर्मल है, इस न्यू नॉर्मल का न्यू हट जाएगा, हम नॉर्मल हो जाएंगे, एक बार आपसे फिर मुखातिब होंगे ICFI यूनिवर्सिटी के प्रांगण में. सर, आपका सादर स्वागत है, अभिवंदन है, अभिवादन है. और मैं चाहूंगा कि जो वर्ड ऑफ विजडम है, that should enlighten my students and millions those who are listening to you, sir. Once again, I welcome you on my behalf. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kothari, for these nice words, very optimistic words, very prophetic words, and the state in which we are passing through in the midst of this global pandemic. So before I really capture the spirit of our today's webinar, let me profoundly thank ICFI University under the able leadership and guidance of Professor Kothari, which is organizing these series of webinars on the issues which are of great contemporary relevance. And I can see the interdisciplinary nature of today's talk, which Professor Arun Saini has organized, which brings the technology, the intellectual property, the innovation, the antitrust, the competition, all these disciplines on one single platform. So I believe the very nature of the today's talk is wide encompassing and is of great relevance in the today's time. I am very thankful to Arun for organizing this event and to give me this opportunity to share my thoughts with the students, faculty, and other participants. I can also see Professor Arun Singh from the Department of Law of this university logged in, and I again thank him that when I last visited the campus, he invited me for an event at the ICFI campus, which was a sprawling and very serene campus where the true learning can take place. So with these words, I once again thank you to all for giving me this opportunity and to share my thoughts on the issues of innovation interface with IPR and innovation. Now, before I share my PPT or the presentation, let me offer some very basic thoughts that in this today's technology-driven era, and let me here add, though due to this pandemic, there may be a great distress in the economy, in the jobs, but at the same time, as we always find an answer out of an apada. So even in the midst of this pandemic, we have been able to meet, connect, and communicate. This has been possible only through technology. Now I can feel the same thing as I am interacting with you physically. So that same experience I can see and I can feel, and this is because of the technology. So I would say we should always remain eternally optimist. We have come out with some good solutions. And of course, there is a great distress in the economy and people have lost their jobs and livelihood. But at the same time, new verticals are emerging, new technological solutions are coming. Now, I can only share from my personal experience that for these very events, at one point of time, we used to have book our tickets, hotels, travel, and spend so much of time. But we are now able to do it from the cool cocoon of our homes and offices. And we are having the same feeling as if we are physically interacting with each other. So technology is a great enabler. And I believe and I hope that this will give us some more solutions as we go ahead through this pandemic, which we shall overcome with, again, technological and research and development efforts of the pharma companies. So now let me mention that what exactly we are talking about. We are talking about three things. One, we are talking about competition law. We are talking about innovation. And we are also talking about intellectual property rights. How this trinity of these three, they interplay and interact with each other. That is a billion-dollar question. And let me put it very succinctly, that how the interplay takes place. As you all are aware, that research and development, it tells significant capital and cost. There are costs for every research and development. You conduct a research on a vaccine, if I may give a very contemporary example, you continue to conduct phase 1 trial, phase 2 trial, phase 3 trial, and at the end of the day, your product may not succeed. It may not get the regulatory approval. So what will happen? Your entire investment will go waste. So research and development, it entails huge sunk capital cost. And at the end of the research cycle, you may not be able to come out with any product which can be commercially exploited. So what would happen at the end of the day? So at the end of the day, you would lose your money. Now, conversely, if you invest in your research and development, and if you are able to come out with a vaccine which you can commercially exploit, then certainly you would be legitimately entitled to earn profits out of your efforts, out of your research, and that you can very well commercially exploit. And the beauty would be that once you get returns on your investments, then the innovation cycle will proceed further. Then you would be able to innovate your products, you will be able to improve your products, and you will be able to take it further from what you have achieved so far. So this is how the IPR rights, which are so critical, they reward innovators, because you have spent your time, you have spent your money, you have spent your efforts. Then the innovator or the inventor, he must be sufficiently protected. He must be sufficiently rewarded for his efforts. And that is the reason that all intellectual property rights, be it Trademarks Act, be it Copyrights Act, be it Designs Act, be it Geographical Indication Act, be it Semiconductor Layout Designs Act, be it any other intellectual property strand of law, every innovator or inventor, he has to be given the rewards for his hard work. That is the idea behind the IPR. So therefore, as I mentioned, if you innovate something, you will be rewarded. And in that process, you would be able to recoup benefits on the investments which have taken place. Now, with this background, if this innovation cycle will move on, because the more returns you get, you would have more incentive to invest those returns for future research and for future products. So this innovation cycle goes on. But at the same time, it may happen that you may acquire monopoly rights, you may acquire market power, you may acquire dominance because of your this IPR rights. So the law, when it rewards, it gives you some exclusivity. It gives you an exclusive right to use that technology, that product in the manner which you deem appropriate. So this is the broad framework of IPR laws, where an innovator is rewarded and he is given some exclusivity for a defined period during which he can recoup his investments, so that the law sufficiently rewards him. So there is always an incentive to innovate. If there is no incentive to innovate, I must say we are headed nowhere. So innovation would come from, of course, a larger ecosystem. Now, if we see the examples of successful innovations, where they are taking place in Silicon Valley. The entire thought, the innovation comes, and even these startups, which is the mantra these days, these dropouts, they have been able to come up with product that requires a larger ecosystem. I must say, only that country can succeed in innovation which rewards innovation and which does not stigmatize failure. But I am afraid that all countries do not have such an enabling ecosystem. And in many places, failure is a stigma and people don't get a second chance. So that is I think, the enabling environment in which the new thought, new process can come. But if we penalize, if we stigmatize failures, and we do not provide a second chance, a third chance, I think people will not take risk. So that is why I must mention that apart from our cultural ethos, in which the failure itself is looked down by the society, by the family, by the friends, by the relatives, we need to have an enabling ecosystem where we need to support all possible efforts, and failure is not a sin, and success should be duly rewarded. if we can imbibe these basic qualities, the innovation cycle will bloom. Now, as we all aware, all successful technological companies, they have their origin either in the US or in the other developed economies. You take any segment, any vertical of the economy, and you will find that the idea has come from there. And we have, of course, replicated that idea in our own country, in our own milieu, in our own ecosystem, after customizing it within our own domestic laws and social milieu. So therefore, what I want to highlight in the beginning is that for innovation, an enabling environment is also very necessary. And I am happy to say that we have also come out with an Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of India. Now, this is a very important piece of legislation because a country is handicapped not only because of, as we say in competition law or antitrust law as it is known, only by entry barriers. There should be no exit barriers. So only when we have such an enabling environment where there are no entry barriers, where there are no exit barriers, and people are free to innovate, and if they fail, they should be given a chance to move. I think only in such a legal environment, people would be able to take some efforts and attempt in developing the products. So in that context, I would say the competition law, of course, looks at the entry barriers, that there should be no entry barriers, and people should have free entry in the markets. At the same time, it is equally important there should be no exit barriers also. So if the people, if they are unable to carry the business successfully, they should be given a chance to exit without any acrimony so that the new management can take over and can take the business forward, so that the assets do not become waste or stale, and at the same time, people can also move on. So we need a very enabling ecosystem of policies and the laws whereby entries are not impeded, exit is not restricted. So in such an environment, people will have an incentive to innovate and to become entrepreneur and to take their chances. And if they fail, they should be given an exit and they should try their hands on another product. So that is what I say, that country will progress the most which does not look down on the failures. That country which does not take failure as a sin. Only then, and I can say it, that if what makes America the great enabler of innovation is precisely this, that they have this environment where the people can experiment. And in that light, coming back to our topic of innovation, competition, and IPR, and as I mentioned, the rationale behind giving reward and exclusivity to the intellectual property rights which the people have innovated or have invented is that they will get their returns on their capital for a defined period, and thereafter the things would become public. Now comes the role of competition law, or as in some jurisdiction it is called antitrust law. For example, if I am given an exclusivity, I have innovated vaccine, for example, for COVID-19, and I have put my all research and development efforts, investment, capital, everything. And at the end of the day, if I am coming with a vaccine, and if I am given an exclusivity right to market and to manufacture it for 20 years, then that statutory monopoly may be susceptible to abuse. So for example, if I am a manufacturer and I have got this technology to manufacture license, to manufacture vaccines, and I license this technology during my patent period at a very exorbitant price, or if I license it to different manufacturers on discriminatory terms, then that would raise antitrust issues. Because ultimately, IPR is a private right, whereas the competition law looks at the market as a whole. So this criticality of the interface between IPR and competition law is very important, because apparently you will see that intellectual property rights, they create a sort of monopoly in favor of the inventor, and the competition law frowns upon, proscribes, and looks down adversely upon the abuse of such monopolies. Now, please mark my word very clearly. The competition law also does not frown upon monopoly per se. Acquiring market size or the scales is no sin under the competition law. Only the abuse of market power, only the abuse of dominant position, only the abuse of monopoly is prohibited under the law. So therefore, we have to understand it very clearly that IPR and competition law, which apparently look to conflict and be in contradiction to each other, they are not. In fact, they all are supplementing and complementing each other. So therefore, I would say they do not supplant each other. Rather, they supplement each other. So what they are essentially doing is that IPR is creating an innovation virtuous cycle by rewarding the innovator or the inventor, giving him exclusive rights over marketing and distribution or manufacturing. But at the same time, if that exclusivity or that exclusive concession by the statute is abused, is misused, then the role of competition law will arise. So I would say it is not a very simplistic thing that IPR creates monopoly and competition law breaks monopolies. It would be very simplistic assessment to look at the interface between intellectual property rights and competition law. It is certainly not that. As I mentioned and as I explained, that we both supplement and complement each other. We are in great synergy. We are in a great symbiotic position with each other, and we do not supplant or cut into each other. So IPR is necessary to reward innovator, but at the same time, that reward or that exclusivity is not abused. A tab is kept by competition law or antitrust law as it is known. So you as students of engineering, in due course, I am all confident that you would come out with great many ideas, and you would definitely try to convert those ideas into wealth, which can be distributed equally amongst the society. So that ecosystem we all are striving and endeavoring to achieve, where we have an idea and that idea can get some capital support, and we can create that idea into a successful business model, and that model will result in creation of wealth, in distribution of wealth equitably among the society. So I think if with this approach, if we look at the things, then as a future entrepreneur, you all would have to live with not only with your technology, but also you will have to live with our regulatory and legal system, because business is not free. It is not that you can start your business without any regulatory requirements or compliances. You will definitely and decidedly, you will have to apply for marketing for approval. At every stage, you will have to have an interface with the regulatory system of the country. So therefore, this talk assumes greater significance and salience for you all who in future would be looking for new thoughts, new ideas, and further to convert those ideas into commercial products and to create wealth in the society. So I guess for that, we need to understand and imbibe at an early stage that if you are a future entrepreneur, if you are a startup, what are the challenges you will face and what are the legal remedies you can exercise and exploit to defend and to carry on your business. That would be a very important point for you to consider, because having idea is a great thing to begin with, But to converting that idea into a successful business proposition, you would have to navigate and work through the multiplicity of compliances through various legislations and rules. That unfortunately is a part of our larger ecosystem, which the governments are over the years progressively decontrolling, deregulating, and making it more conducive for the participants to do business in the country. And that, of course, is the flagship scheme of the government also, to make the business ease much better and simpler. So in this, let me tell you that we have, in the last 30 years, before our economy was closed, most of the production was in the command and control economy type of era. So there was virtually no incentive to innovate because you are sufficiently protected from competition. There was a time when India was not open. I am talking about India before 1991. So in those days, as you all would appreciate, there was no competition. There were no many products and services, and there were essentially public sector undertakings which were providing goods and services. Like in those days, the Post and Telegraph or the Department of Telecommunications was providing telecom services. But what was the fate of that era? If you remember, and those who are contemporary to my age, they would remember that owning a telephone itself was a big luxury in those times. And I must say, there was a long queue before you will get a telephone connection, the landline telephone connection, which was considered to be a symbol of pride and having come in the society. But those were the days when we didn't have these simple luxuries accessible, which today we take for granted. But today, everyone has internet and mobile connectivity. So how is it was possible? Because for the same reason, when the competition came, when the markets were open to the private players, to the foreign players, and then you can only compete if you can innovate and you can provide better products and services through affordable rates. So in this context, I would mention that competition is a great, enabler. It snaps at your heels to innovate, otherwise you cannot stay in the market. So long as there were monopolies, there was no competition. The DOT had its monopoly. It had no incentive to innovate its product design or the user experience because they were assured under the government monopoly that they are safe from any competition. So there was no innovation. But once the market opened up to domestic and foreign global players, the prices start falling, the services became better, and newer and better products came in the market. Now, this is true not only of telecom, but other sectors also. So in telecom, if we all have suffered, I remember my initial days at University of Delhi when I landed in Delhi to study. And I used to stay in a residential hall of Delhi University, and there used to be one landline connection to cater to 200 residents of the hall. And you can very well imagine in those days, the rates of STD or rates of calling were very high. And there were different slabs by the DOT that after 7, the prices will be half, and after 11 in the night, the prices will be 1/4. There were long queues. You will stand outside that queue and wait for your call. And then you will, without any privacy, you have to talk, and 10 other people are snapping at yourself to finish the talk. So that was the time and era which we have lived through. But fortunately, that is a past. If I give you another example of aviation sector. Now in aviation, the Hawaii Yatra, it was considered to be a very big status symbol. Because in those days, Air India alone was flying the skies. It was monopolizing the sky. So if you are a monopolist, why should you innovate? Why would you improve? Because there is no competition. But when the markets were opened up and private players came, the pressure was felt on the incumbents, monopolists, who now felt the heat due to the competition which was unleashed by the entrepreneurial skill and the private capital, and they had to leg up or otherwise they have to fold up. So that is the situation. Now I remember those, again going back to that era when people used to see Hawai Yatra a very big achievement. And I can tell you, they used to read newspapers, the zodiac sign in the newspaper, Rashifal. And we always used to find कि क्या इस साल हवाई यात्रा का योग है, क्या कोई ऐसा योग बन सकता है? And those were the days when these astrologers would write on these things. But today, you won't find these columns anymore, where anybody would write that you have a Hawai Yatra ka Yog this year or next year, because it has become so affordable, so cheaper, so equitable. And of course, there are miles to go to get more better products and services. So this is the aviation sector. I'm giving you some examples to demonstrate that how monopoly can be dangerous for the economy, for the society, for the consumers, for the markets, for the governments, for everyone. Now you take the example of banking. Now again in that era, the banking sector was monopolized by public sector banks. SBI, of course, was in the lead. And if you remember, again, going back to 90s, not very long back in time journey, if you have to open an account with the SBI, it was again a very status symbol. And to your shock and surprise, you would know that in those days when you had to open an account, you have to bring a guarantor with you, who in turn must have the banking account with the bank for minimum of 5 or 10 years, something like that. So again, giving my own experience of that closed economy, when I came to Delhi and I needed to open a bank account with the Delhi University's SBI branch, I was asked to bring a guarantor who is having a bank account with this bank for 10 years. Now I was surprised. I was not seeking any loan. I was not seeking any loan from the bank. Rather, I was putting my money into the savings account to be opened with the bank. So the question of me giving guarantee really flabbergasted me. I was shocked that why I should be called upon to give a guarantor for putting my money with the bank. On the contrary, the assurance should come from the bank that your money is safe and we guarantee its safety and returns. Now, those again were the days, no competition, and they were, rest assured, irrespective of whatever behavior they do or conditions they put, they can get away. But once the licenses were given to private banks, and of course now this is an era of fintech also, as you call it, the things dramatically changed. Now what happened now? You all are aware now. What has happened? Now today, it has become very easier to open a bank account. Now while delivering this talk to you, if I open another window and I can do it in a jiffy, I can open a bank account which will potentially give me more interest rates than the public sector banks. So again, to highlight the role of innovation, the role of innovation in our economy for consumer welfare. So this is the example which I have given so far from telecommunications, from aviation, from banking. Last example I would give from the automobile sector. Now in the 70s and 80s, of course, there were only Ambassador and Padmini. These were the two rarities which only the well-heeled off could have afforded to drive on the roads. And of course, for the lesser mortals, there was no such choice. Initially, the Maruti came, things became better, but still it remained out of the reach of a common man. But once this entire this ecosystem bloomed, then I think the weight came down. Now we don't have to book for the cars and wait for donkey's years to get the delivery. Gone are the days. But I can tell you again, even in this automobile sector, when the two-wheeler segment I'm talking about, the Chetak was the king of the road, the Chetak brand of Bajaj. And I can tell you in that time that people had to book, had to wait for long to get delivery of Chetak scooter. And until that time, the delivery date is specified, the date of marriage would not be fixed, because that is considered to be a very status symbol gift to be given to the groom. So this is the few thoughts which I have shared with you to remind ourselves that what today we are getting has been the product of the sufferings and the denials and inequitable distribution of the past. Our reform process has been, like in any other democratic setup, was extremely slow-paced, very extremely slow-paced. We opened late, we opened in bits and bits and very slowly. So ultimately, we have moved, but we have moved very decisively. Ultimately, the reforms in any democratic setup will take time, but you would appreciate that at the end of the day, in a democracy, there are other core values which we also cherish. So unlike a setup in an autocracy or in a dictatorship, you may leash out the reforms very quickly and fast, but your other freedoms, your religious freedoms, your freedom of speech and expression, your various other freedoms which come from being a human are also protected. So I think we have been extremely lucky that we are living in a democratic setup, and we have been able to enjoy the new products and new services, and at the same time we have been able to exercise and avail our democratic freedoms very successfully. And today, incidentally, 26th November, which we have been celebrating now for some years as Constitution Day, the day when the Constitution was adopted by the Constituent Assembly, and it is an eternal reminder of the freedom which this great Constitution document strove for. When we talk about the political freedom, we talk about the economic freedom, all these freedoms which are ingrained in the preamble to the Constitution, and we all are striving to achieve. So in this backdrop, I will make a very brief presentation on the technical aspects of IPR, innovation, and competition, a very brief, and then I would be taking some questions. Is this arrangement good, Professor Arun?
Yeah, please.
All right. So what I will do, I will share a very brief presentation. I have already made my few observations, and a very small presentation I would be sharing with the students so they can get benefited out of it. So can you see my presentation?
Yeah, it's visible.
It is visible?
It's visible.
All right. So after this presentation, which is very brief, I would open the floor for questions, and I request the moderator to tell me how the questions will be put by the students or the faculties directly or through chat box, or moderator will be putting these questions to me after speaking to the students. So be that as it may, as I mentioned in the beginning, that intellectual property is a generic term. Now it is, if I look at the WTO documents, then it is defined to, include copyright, related rights, trademarks, geographical indications, industrial designs, patents, layout design of semiconductors and integrated circuits, so on and so forth. So this is basically to help sustain the lead and investment of those with technical know-how and with successful marketing schemes, and are generally seen to foster immense commercial return. But of course, it is also sometimes very uncertain if ultimately the research comes a cropper. And therefore, it is very important, as I mentioned, and repeating again, that it is necessary to reward the innovator. Otherwise, there will be no incentive to innovate. If there is no innovation, we all will be worse off. So, all forms of intellectual property have some potential interface with competition law. As I mentioned, IPRs create a monopoly in favor of innovator, and competition law does not like abuse of monopolies. I am only saying abuse of monopoly. We don't say that we don't like monopolies. That was in the MRTP era. In the old competition law, Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act 1969, in that law of that socialistic era, the monopoly or the size itself was perceived to be bad. That is not the case with the new law. Now, as normally understood, intellectual property provides exclusive rights to the holders to perform a productive or commercial activity, but this does not automatically include the right to exert restrictive or monopoly power in a market or society. So there is a compact, there is an arrangement, there is a legal mechanism that you will be given this right subject to that you will not abuse your right and would put restrictive conditions in licensing your technology, in licensing the fruits of your innovation. You have to do it in a very fair and non-discriminatory terms. I will give an example, very pertinent example in the case of mobile phones. Now, every mobile phone has thousands of parts, and every part has a standard essential patent by some developer. So in one mobile phone, you will find there are standard essential patents, and standard essential patent is very necessary if we have to interoperate the instruments. Otherwise, the instruments will not be operable. If you put a SIM in one mobile, it will not work in another mobile. So therefore, the mobile manufacturers or the original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, that is those who manufacture the mobile handsets, they have to license these essential patents, standard essential patents from the patent holder. Now, what is the obligation of the standard essential patent holder? Of course, he has innovated, he has been given the exclusivity, and therefore he has the right. But while licensing that technology, he is supposed to do it in a FRAND term, FRAND, fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory manner. So that is the obligation which the competition law puts on an IPR holder. So I mentioned that there is no tension between an intellectual property right and a competition law obligation. They both can stand in harmony. All that the competition law requires is enjoy your monopoly, have your innovation fruits with you, but while sharing licensing, please do it on a FRAND manner. Do it in a non-restrictive, non-exclusive, non-abusive manner. That is all. So let us remember, after all, intellectual property right is a private right. As a great author, Cornish, puts it, it is a right to stop others from doing certain things. A thing, in other words, to stop pirates, counterfeiters, imitators, and even in some cases, third parties who have independently reached the same ideas from exploiting them without the license of the right owner. So this is I think, the crux of the whole thing, that what are you legitimately entitled to being an innovator, and what are your parameters and perimeters within which you can legitimately exercise your IPR rights. So coming again to the interface, I must mention intellectual property right recognize the right as the knowledge, as it involves enormous amount of research efforts and argue against any imposition of restriction on it so as to promote and encourage growth of such treasure. One could agree with such a proposition in a situation where everyone has access to that knowledge. The relationship between competition law control and intellectual property rights may be perceived to be apparently contradictory. As I mentioned previously, IPRs create monopoly, but at the same time, competition law take care of abuse of monopolies, as there is a potential conflict, apparently, in that how your rights exist and how you exercise that right. If you exercise your rights in an unreasonable manner, the competition law will strike. Otherwise, we both are in symbiosis, in synergy, and there is no conflict. It cannot be denied that competition law and IPRs operate in different domains with distinct objectives and applications. Across the world, jurisprudence on competition law is evolving. So let me tell you, in India also, IPR was a buzzword in the 90s when after the WTO, we started recognizing the need to protect IPRs. Otherwise, in our country, the counterfeiting, the imitations, they were rampant. But after signing the WTO agreements, particularly TRIPS agreement, trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, it became obligatory for us also to bring our IPR statutes in sync with our WTO obligations, particularly in terms with the TRIPS agreement, that is the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, and we accordingly had to change our laws, and we had to now provide a more robust regime to protect the intellectual property right holders. Competition law in those days was not a buzzword, but today it has acquired a very good salience because competition can come once the economy is opened up. And opening up of economy is not a one-time thing that you have opened up and all of a sudden the market will be flooded with various producers and manufacturers. It takes time. And there are other regulatory things also which we need to ease before we can truly have a very functioning and vibrant ecosystem. So competition law, of course, frowns upon anti-competitive practices and operates towards protection of practices which help in furtherance of the smooth functioning of the market. IPRs, on the other hand, operate to give exclusivity over your intellectual property. Thus, it can be said IP seeks to protect individual interests and competition law protects the market. This is the buzzword, that intellectual property is a private right. So, to my mind, the scope of a market regulator or a market regulation is much higher than the individual protection of your intellectual property. So, competition law is emerging as a law designed for regulation of economic power, and on the other hand, innovation-driven developed countries are expanding IPR coverage over a wide range of markets and products, giving rise to monopoly power and dominance in the market. I would put, I think, the consumer welfare in this whole process, because at the end, the purpose of the competition law also is to protect the consumer welfare. That is very important. So to that extent, I think this sums up well. Competition laws aim towards protection of robust competition in the market, while IP laws work to protect the necessary ability to earn a return on investments that is necessary to innovate. Both lead to enter the market with production of desired technology, services, or products. Now, if you see at the India's competition law regime, it came in 2002 and it started functioning from 2009. So, as against the intellectual property rights regime, which is quite old, but even if I take the reformed the IPR regime post our accession to WTO in 1995, it is comparatively around a century old, I would say. Though, of course, our trademarks and copyrights laws date back much earlier in time. But even if I take in the opened up economy, this regime is there for 25 years. But competition law regime was in 2002, it was enacted, and in 2009 we started functioning. So broadly, we have worked for around 10 years. And of course, it's a very complex economic regulation, and we have miles to go before we evolve this as a important system in the regulatory framework. So the new competition law, that is the Competition Act 2002, it came in the statute book. And in this law, there is a clear provision, an express provision has been made in the Competition Act. There's reasonable conditions as may be necessary for protecting IPRs during their exercise would not constitute anti-competitive practices. So due care has been taken. So there is no conflict between competition law and IPR. IPR law gives you monopoly, IPR gives you exclusivity, so long as you are putting reasonable conditions in exercise of that right. But the moment you put unreasonable conditions, the competition law will strike. This is the nub of the interface between competition law and IPR. So Section 3(5) of the Competition Act clearly says nothing contained in this section. Which section? The section which deals with anti-competitive agreements shall restrict the right of any person to restrain any infringement of or to impose reasonable conditions as may be necessary for protecting any of his following IPRs, be it copyright, patents, trademarks, geographical indications, designs, and semiconductor IC Layout Design Act. So this is the, I must say, balancing which the legislature has done, that you get the rewards through exclusivity of your innovation, but you will not exercise that right in an unfettered manner. Under our constitution, right to do business is not absolute. Like any other freedom, it is subject to reasonable restrictions. So while summing up, I may only conclude by saying that IPR laws and the competition laws share the common purpose of promoting innovation and enhancing consumer welfare. The IPR laws provide incentives for innovation and its dissemination and commercialization by establishing enforceable property rights for the creators of new and useful products, more efficient processes, and original works of expression. In the absence of IPRs, imitators could more rapidly exploit the efforts of innovators and innovators without compensation. Rapid imitation would reduce commercial value of your innovation and erode incentives to invest, ultimately to the detriment of consumers. The competition law promotes innovation and consumer welfare by prohibiting certain actions that may harm competition with respect to either existing or new ways of serving consumers. So I believe if this bottom line is kept in mind, then there will be no tension between these two branches, and innovation cycles will continue to flourish once we imbibe this, that yes, state will reward you for your innovation, but you will not use that innovation in a restrictive or discriminatory manner. Thank you very much. Now I would request the moderator or the person who is dealing with this, that questions can be put and I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Dr. KD Singh. It was really a very informative session for all of us. So there is one question from Yogesh. How the copyrights laws differ from laws of intellectual property rights?
I would say copyright is a subset of intellectual property rights. Intellectual property rights is a larger or a broader word. Now, this word we use, this is a broad rubric. In intellectual property rights framework, trademark, copyright, patents, designs, everything will fall. So it is one and the same thing. Copyright Act is a part of IPR. It is subsumed within the larger rubric of IPR.
Okay. Now I request participants to please, the session is open for the question answer. You may also put your questions in the chat box. Actually, there is an examination from 1 o'clock.
Okay. So I think then, yes, certainly you can share my email with the students if they have any queries anytime post-examination when they are in a proper and free bent of mind. They can always put questions and I will be very happy to interact and to respond to their queries.
Is there any questions from the participants?
So I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, actually, I want to ask that if I'm starting a new company and I have chosen a name, but that name is not a trademark at that time, but some other companies also doing business on that name. They don't have trademark for this name. So, is it advisable or to apply for the trademark, sir, for me? Can I get that trademark on that name?
Well, I can say that registration of trademark is not necessary for you to exercise your IPR. I think there is echo. So I was mentioning that registration is not sine qua non or necessary conditions. For example, if you are using an trademark even without registration, and if you can say that you have the prior usage, you will have valid grounds in law to proceed. Because the purpose is not that people just register a trademark and squat over it just to blackmail others and to give them that, look, we have done it. No. The question is of usage. The idea is not to create these private monopolies in this manner. So when you have started using, if I am using a markup for 40 years and if I can establish it, then I think whether I have registered it or not, or whether somebody else has registered it or not, that will not come in your way. And anybody who takes away your right, then certainly can be sued for passing off under the law of torts. So the answer to this is that when you register a company, at that moment, you have to give your names, and the registrar will examine from the register that whether registrar of companies would see whether already similar names have been given to other companies or not. So if these names have already been taken care, then certainly you may not get it. And if somebody has unjustly taken, then certainly that can be sued and his name can be struck off. But these are the detailed remedies. But I would say registration is not required for using anything. You can use your IPR irrespective of registration. But for registering the name, there is a process under the Companies Act, and they will do a due diligence, because ultimately people and consumers should not be confused. So that is the whole idea. Otherwise, that will be against public policy. So if the name is already existing, now if there is a IFCI university and the UGC allow any another university by this name, you have developed so much of capital, so much of good faculty, institution, students, but somebody else will be, misusing your whole efforts. So I think there is a process under the Companies Act, and that has to be followed.
But sir, the problem is that the name that I have registered is not the same as of the other company. But the phonetic, actually, the pronunciation of these two words is quite similar. So if I get success in my business, if my company get popular, the other will claim me, that was my name. Why are you using that?
Absolutely. So therefore, yes, I fully agree that is why trademark not only looks at the spellings, but how they are pronounced. If there is a phonetic similarity, then the subsequent name would not be allowed, because ultimately people should not be confused. The whole purpose, the public policy is that public at large should not be confused. Now, who is entitled to? That is a matter which the courts will decide depending upon the evidence and facts of each case, who was using the trademark name before. But yes, registrar will take due care. For example, you cannot start a company by saying Hindustan Technology Private Limited, because it will give an impression that you are a government entity. So there are certain names which you cannot use in your company's name. Similarly, you should not have any similarity, phonetic or grammatic, with the name of a company previously registered. There are detailed guidelines and you have to follow those guidelines, and subject to that, company's new name can be registered.
I want to ask you, that the company which is conflicting, the name of company which is conflicting with me, it is doing business in some other domain, and I'm doing something else. Both the domains are different. So is it possible to get a trademark if any conflict occurs in the future? Because the
Very well.
field of business is, yes, sir.
Now, if I can give an example, Infosys is a technology company. Now, tomorrow, if there is a university which comes by the name Infosys University, now obviously the common man would think that Infosys University has ventured into the education sector and they have set up the Infosys University. So the people would be able to capitalize on the goodwill of Infosys which they have earned. So I don't think these are, as I mentioned, these are the question of evidence. They cannot be answered in abstract, because unless we have the factual background, only then we can say whether this can be allowed or that can be allowed. But of course, I agree. One name given to a company for doing one business cannot be taken for other businesses. Subject, of course, it depends upon the goodwill and extent of the reach of that company. So these are very complex questions depending on the facts. In abstract, in theoretically, we may not have any ready answer for them.
So one more thing, there's a confusion actually, which I've heard, that the trademark is given for the states, not for the whole India. Sometimes. So is that right?
Yes, it can be done. The registrar of trademark can give the trademark rights subject to certain conditions. As I mentioned, that no right is absolute. So if you are operating in a very limited geographical setup, then they will not give it to the whole of India, because otherwise that itself will take away the freedom of others. They have sufficient restrictions and conditions that they can impose upon the people applying for trademarks.
Thank you very much, sir, for clearing things.
Any other questions or question from the participant or participants? I think now there are no questions.
So I think then
they are actually अभी 1 बजे से एग्जाम स्टार्ट होने वाला है हम लोग. Okay. So once again, we are very thankful to you, Dr. KD Singh. It was a very nice, informative session. You have spent time with us, and we request you again, when pandemic part is over, please do visit our campus. That physical interaction is, I think, still the best one. However, your presentation was excellent. We have recorded the session, and with your kind permission, if you permit us, we'll share the presentation on our YouTube channel and with other students who are not present in the session due to that their examinations. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank
please.
you. And I must thank my gratitude to the IFCAI University family, and for such a cohesive team, and for always coming out with innovative topics from across the sectors of the economy. I think you have done a great job during the pandemic by spreading the knowledge through various your initiatives. And of course, you can use the video. Knowledge must be shared. There is no doubt on that. And I am always a firm believer that we should share our knowledge in whatever way. I will also, of course, share the presentation as well. And in any way, if the students need or the faculties, I will be very happy to share. And I certainly looking forward to visit your campus physically once we pass through these pandemic times. Thank you very much. Thank you.